Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Ganganasadrisham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami.
Hello, welcome. Pay very close attention to these teachings. They are from a work of Adi Shankaracharya, Viveka Chudamani, and it is Advaita Vedanta. So these are the teachings that you find in the scriptures. They are according to the scriptures. So pay very attention to these teachings. Listen very carefully to these teachings. Then you should reflect upon them, reflecting a lot upon these teachings, and then meditate upon these teachings so that they may bear fruit in your heart. Moving on to 190, verse 190. This Atman, though the Atman of all, sees itself separated. Identifying itself with this intellect, it becomes as that which is cut off from the whole, limited as a pitcher is cut down from the earth. So, despite being the Atman of all, the great Atman, it sees itself separated. Like they give the example of a pitcher and the earth. It's just pitcher in a different form. It's not separate, it's earth, but it appears to be separated. Only because of that contact with the upadis, the superimposed layers, sheets, bodies, does this Atman manifest qualities which are in name, as the fire from the contact with iron takes the qualities that are in iron, and yet does not change its nature. Therefore, this Atman is always uniform. Its nature is beyond everything, so it is always untouched. So now, the path to liberation. The disciple says, so far I have understood. That's what a disciple says. Usually, they always have understood, yet not really. But if this is so, liberation is impossible. It's a good logic, but logic condition. You say that through ignorance the Atman has become bound, and you say that there is no beginning to these upadis. If it is so, how can it end? There cannot be an end to what has no beginning, and therefore, this state of egoism must be endless. So how can there be any liberation? Kindly tell me that, O Savior of mankind. So his logic is correct. It's like looking at the mirage, not sure how it. And, well, it doesn't exist, it's a mirage, but I'm seeing it, so it must exist. When did it begin? Well, depends. If it doesn't exist, it has no beginning. But I'm seeing it, I may say that it began now. But again, it doesn't exist. It's a mirage, so no beginning. If it has no beginning, it has no end. So everything, it's an appearance only. It's not a concrete, objective thing. But this is the question. So how can there be any liberation if there cannot be an end for it? So the Master answers, you have questioned rightly and fully, O learned one. So this is learned one, not wise one. One that has learned well things, and he is applying a logic that lacks direct experience. So he is not a wise one. He is a learned one. Now listen attentively and carefully. The imagination that one has through delusion, imagination, through ignorance, can never be an established fact. So if it is imagination, a mirage, it's not an established fact, it is a delusion. And without ignorance, there can never be any contact with objects, because no imagination working in imagining objects, so no contact with that which is not being created. With the upadis of Atman, who is alone, actionless, formless, as the blueness of the sky. So, and without ignorance, there can never be any contact with the objects, with the upadis of the Atman. So, no contact between the objects and the upadis of the Atman, because the Atman is always untouched. The contact is established through the objects and the body which is experiencing, the layers, the upadis. But actually, as we have seen already, or probably we will see after, because I'm doing this in 2 languages, so the mind is creating everything. The experiencer and that which is experienced. So the seer, beyond all qualities, all actions, the blissful Atman, has taken this state of being I through ignorance only. It is not real. When the ignorance comes to a knot, it does not remain, it disappears. It doesn't end, it disappears. So it is through ignorance only, imagination only, that this blissful Atman, Brahman, has become this I, just through ignorance, just through an imagination. And when that ceases, it doesn't remain. It's like the physical body. When it dies, it remains collapsed on the floor. It doesn't disintegrate. So it would be the same as the body disappearing. So it doesn't end, it disappears. As long as ignorance remains, so long does this state of being I exists. There's only I, but in this case, this I am the body exists, which rises from the false knowledge. You see the snake in the rope only when you are in ignorance. When the ignorance is gone, the snake is not there. So you cannot say, when did it arrive? When did it departed? It's simply recognized there and then not seen there. That avidya is beginningless because it doesn't exist. But when vidya takes rise, then this avidya disappears. Is there, it doesn't appear, it is there. And then it just disappears. So vidya is wisdom, avidya ignorance. Just as in the wakeful state, the dream comes to a knot. So you wake up from the dream disappears. With root and it all dies. So when you awake, everything with its roots and all, it dies. So when it is merged in the Atman, this intellect also comes to an end like previous non-existence. So apparent existence and previously to that is just non-existent. Not even dormant state, but non-existent. We see that a previous state of non-existence may come to an end, even though it is beginningless. It is the same with the semblance of an individual self. This semblance is due to the false identification of the Atman with the intellect and other coverings. The Atman, by its very nature, is essentially distinct and separate from them. The identification of Atman with the intellect is caused by ignorance. And just, it is the same as this, as the rope in a snake. It is the same. So the snake is not separated from the rope. It is there. Without the rope, it wouldn't be seen. So they are the same. Only the serpent doesn't really exist. Real knowledge is the cause of its destruction. Knowledge of the rope, knowledge of Brahman, knowledge of the Atman. Real knowledge is that Brahman and Atman are one and the same. This is the sure decision of the scriptures. This is what the scriptures acknowledge in the end of all. And that oneness of Atman only exists through discrimination between this self, and the real self. So without it, there's no oneness of Atman. Well, there is, but not for the individual. There is water mixed with the mud, and when the mud subsides, the water remains clear. Or when the mud is separated from the water, you see the clear water. But the water, when mixed with its upadis, the mud, does not appear clear. So also, when you separate this Atman from its upadi, the non-self, the Atman shines in its own glory. So even in the skies, clouded, it is still there. And once you remove the clouds, it shines as it always has been. Only you weren't seeing it. When you have done away with the unreal, renunciation, then then manifests the real. And one comes face to face with the real. Therefore, it is meet to do away with the unreal by identifying oneself with the real self. So, there's this polarization of seekers trying to reach the real. And this is why, because they think in linear terms of transitioning one state to another. But the thing is, the steps towards liberation are the steps away from the upadis, from that which isn't real, that which is not the self that we have been pointing all away. All bodies, right until the Atman, all this is not real. So by renouncing all of this, by turning your face away from this, you tune more and more with the real. And it's not about finding the real, it is getting free from the unreal, and the real manifests. This ego, which is the result of the fourth sheet, cannot be the Atman because it is transformed, insentient, limited. And it can be seen, it undergoes change, therefore it is impermanent. So not even that is the Atman. It is always until nothing is left, and that nothing is all. And this is where you tune. The fifth sheet is Anandamaya Kosh, the blissful sheet, the reflection of the real blissfulness. But it is reflected in the tamas quality, which is the birth of creation, of Maya. And one feels it only under favorable circumstances, what you consider to be favorable. It's not an objective thing. It comes from good actions and appears without any effort on one's own part. But it's not yet not the self. This is the fifth sheet. It can be seen only in Susupti. This is what's left in Susupti. No mind, no intellect, just this Anandamaya Kosh. And this is why it is bliss. And you come back from that restored. Well, it's a little bit going home a little bit, then coming back, more or less. In dream and in wakeful state, you can get a glimpse of it when you meet with the favorable circumstances or the fulfillment of desires. So the fulfillment of desires or your preferred circumstances, what you call favorable circumstances, may unleash a taste of this Anandamaya Kosh, which is bliss. It's, well, it is in the measure of what's possible also. But it comes from this sheet. This is not the Atman because it has something to depend on, and the Atman shines in its own glory. Then also it is the transformation of nature. It requires good actions to be blissful, so it has a cause. Therefore it is not the Atman, it remains with the body, which is a result of the gunas. Therefore it's not Atman. If you can do away with these 5 sheets through the instructions of the scriptures, what remains? Through discrimination, what remains? The witness, the consciousness. That is the Atman, that which remains. Self-effulgent, free from the 5 sheets because he is prior to them, no connection with them. The witness of the 3 states, Jagrat, Swapna, and Susupti, waking state, dream state, deep sleep state, never changing, pure, ever blissful. Know this as thy own self. That is the Atman. Nature of the self. The pupil said, I do not understand. You ask me to do away with all these 5 sheets, and when I do that, I see nothing remains. I see nothing but voidness of all. Therefore, tell me what is to be known there. Because this is the perception of the mind that something means objects, perceived objects. Void of objects, there's just void, there's nothing for the mind. The master said, O learned one, you have told the truth. Yes, you are quick to understand things. That is the Atman. Because I and everything else are only the transformation, and want of that change is the Atman. So that which you call void, that which you say there's nothing there, it is wholeness, it is the Atman. And tapping into that is tapping into bliss. But first you contemplate on that. That means you abstract from the rest. Then the seeing happens. By whom everything is understood, but who is understood by none. This is the Atman, because he is prior to all. The knower of all, known only by the very keen understanding, pure intellect. Pure intellect, that means a sattvic intellect. No more tamas, no more rajas, no more clouds, dark clouds in the sky. And this is the fruit of discrimination and renunciation, remember. You become the witness of that which you see. It's like identity moves to its rightful place or expands, whatever. When there is nothing to be seen, the concept of a witness becomes irrelevant. Anything to comment here? There's only the concept of witness as these sheets are still being perceived. As you are being able to move from them and remain in that void, that emptiness, the concept of the witness, it doesn't matter because it was a concept that moved away your attention from the objects towards that which is observing the objects. When you are able to remain there in that which you call now void, the concept of witness makes no sense anymore. But of one who can never be comprehended, who can be the witness of that, if he is prior to all? Therefore, the Atman is the witness of himself, because he knows himself. Now, these words are what they are, because, well, it's pure existence. Only that exists, so if there must be a witness, is a witness of itself. Therefore, this Atman, which you have understood, is that void, not separated from it, just not visible yet for you. This is not here, but just to complement. In Jagrat, in Swapna, in Susupti, he manifests in these three states in the form of consciousness and never forgets that. He is uniform, and he remains the witness of all transformations, ever blissful, ever intelligent. Know him in your own heart. So that void is the Atman, only unseen yet because it is perceived as absence of all. All non-self is absent, and that is the self, the Atman, but still not perceived yet because more tuning with that is needed, and that means more abstraction from the rest, so that the brilliance of Atman is seen, its light, its effulgence. How to see him? There is a pitcher of water, and there is the reflection of the sun in the water. Seeing that reflection, the fool thinks that that is the sun. So in the Upadis, the ego, the reflection of the Atman is ignorance. The fool thinks that that is the Atman, that reflection, that identity, which is ego. He thinks the ego is the Atman because it is identity, what is perceived as the source of identity. By giving up the reflection in the water, the ego, one sees the real sun in the sky. So no one should give up these three states. So one should give up these three states, Jagrat, Swapna, and Susupti. So it goes beyond of, should I give up relations, possessions, this and that? Is even more than that. And this is Advaita Vedanta. One should give up these three states, Jagrat, Swapna, and Susupti, and abiding, always continuous on that void. And see that anvil-like Atman, which is the cause of all manifestations and is self-indulgent. This is what happens when you give up all these states and you stay with that void. You will see it. Again, these are just words to point to that which is beyond words. Giving up this body, intellect, and the reflection of consciousness in the intellect, and resting in the cave of the heart. Attention on itself, the observer at the source of I. The seer, resting in the cave of the heart, the seer, the Atman, indivisible consciousness, the manifester of all, separated from the manifested, and the unmanifested, that which still is going to manifest, ever existent and beyond all permeating, very minute, with neither inside nor outside. The one without a second, know him, the real self of all. The individual becomes free from birth and death. But as he still embracing is attached to this body and alike, it doesn't happen. Knowing that blissfulness beyond all description, he is never afraid of anything because he knows nothing is real. And there is no other way to be free from the bondage of this birth and death, except knowing that as one's own self. So, to break ignorance, one has to realize the truth. So, first it is that void that is left after you renounce all three states, all sheets, all manifestations. It's just void. But then that void has to be revealed as blissfulness, the light of the Atman. And that is what cuts illusion. This is the cause of liberation from the world, the consciousness, the knowledge of the non-separateness of the self from the Supreme. By this knowledge, one attains that blissful eternal. By this knowledge, because you will experience this probably a few times until it becomes permanent. One who becomes Brahman does not come back to this ignorance. Therefore, this oneness should be realized. So this coming and going is part, but as you get established in Brahman, as everything else has been dissolved, there is no coming back. More or less. Now that would be too much confusing. Forget. True knowledge of the eternal as pure, supreme, self-existent, self-evident, ever blissful, uniform, not separated from this consciousness. This consciousness itself shines eternal. So the true knowledge of the eternal is not separated from this consciousness. And this consciousness, this I consciousness, this apparent individual consciousness shines in its pristine form always. Everything is Brahman. This is all, the real, one without a second, and because there is no other except the Atman when one realizes the Atman. So this is all real. Because there was no one else besides the Atman. So if there was no one else besides the Atman, whatever was there is Atman. That is the logic. When different kinds of thoughts enter into the Atman, all things become one. Just as what comes out of the earth is not separated from the earth, but earth itself. The earth clay is real, the picture is imagination. It is made from the real, but it's not really real. Existing in name only and not separated from the earth. It is earth which has received the name picture. Brahman alone is real, and whatever comes out from Brahman is real. The real cannot produce what is unreal. It is that. There is nothing except that. He that says there is something separate, his delusion has not yet vanished. He is as one speaking in sleep. So these differentiations are used for the one who is sleeping so that he may awaken. These divisions exist for him, but there's no divisions whatsoever. But again, when the mirage is there, not sure of this pronunciation, if it is mirage or mirage, but okay. When it is there, you can say that it doesn't exist. It is there, but it's a mirage. It doesn't really exist. The scripture Atharva Veda says this world is Brahman, all is Brahman. Therefore, all this world is nothing but Brahman. What you impute to a thing superimpose is not separated from that to which you impute, the substratum. The basis of all is Brahman. Therefore, what you call the world is not the world, but Brahman. So this is where the intelligence analogies come. So there's no problem because everything is Brahman. If this world is real, the scripture becomes worthless. There remains no basis of truth, and the evidence of men of realization who have realized the Atman becomes untrue. But this is the same as saying that the snake is real. It is not separated from the rope. The rope created the snake. So the snake is real, is the Atman.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.